All right. Howdy, everybody. This is Boone Holloday. I'll do another introduction here in a minute. First off, if I've got somebody on there logged in already, if you wouldn't mind typing in the chat box if you can hear me okay, if my audio level is good. Linda. Howdy, Linda. How do I sound on there, Linda? Squirrely. How do I sound? Am I doing all right? Is this good? Do I need to turn up the volume? Good. That's fantastic. Okay. Thumbs up. All right, gig 'em. Well, we're going to hang out here just for 1 minute, let some folks get signed on. No need to rush here. We've got a beautiful day in Fort Bend County. I'm in the Katy area, and we're coming to you live from one of our master gardeners' homes, and we're going to be touring their irrigation system. But again, we're going to wait just a little bit. While we're waiting, go ahead as you're waiting, comment in the comment thread of where you're from. If you're from a master gardener group, I am dark? Okay, cool. Well, my face is going to be dark, and you're in the shade. Yeah, just, if you wouldn't mind, while we're waiting, just chime in on there where you're tuning in from. Across the state, out of state. Sometimes we have some people internationally. Walker County, Huntsville, chiming in. Fantastic. Victoria, fantastic. Got a good group down there. Victoria County Master Gardeners, fantastic group. Callahan. Whew. Man, we're all over the place. And awesome. Cool. Right on. So we got Tarrant. I've got Dallas. We've got Brownsville. We've got Hill Country. We've got Panhandle. We've got East Texas. We're doing pretty good so far. So why don't we go ahead and get started. Again, for people who are just signing in, my name is Boone Holloday. I'm the County Extension Agent for Horticulture in Fort Bend County. This is Richmond, Rosenberg, Sugar Land, 1/3 of Katy, which we're in right now, and Meadows Place, Missouri City, Stafford. Beautiful day here in Fort Bend County. I wish I was doing this about 3 hours ago. It was nice and overcast and cool and breezy, but the sun's out, so if I sweat a little bit today, or if the audio quality is maybe not the best, I apologize, but we're here, and we're doing fantastic. I've got at least Mr. Tim Hartman, Dr. Tim Hartman, on the wrangling today. And so if you've got questions along the way, keep those questions coming in the chat dialogue feature, and Tim will prioritize those. If he can answer them in the chat dialogue, he will. Hopefully he'll be posting up some links along the way that might be appropriate. What we're trying to accomplish today is we're looking at the Earthkind landscape model and talking about evaluation of our irrigation at home. One of the key features of the Earthkind landscape system is appropriate watering in the home landscape and not overdoing it. With Fort Bend County, we're at about 900,000 residents, and that's going up crazy numbers every year. And so for the vast majority of those people to do some type of watering in their home landscape, we put a lot of water out into the yard. And so anything that we can do to try to minimize that while still improving the quality of our landscape is going to be a huge success for us. So we're going to go through kind of the typical installed irrigation system today, go through all the basic components, and just to give you some ideas of some things that you need to be looking for to try to make improvements on along the way. Any questions so far? All right. Well, I'm going to be walking around a little bit. So as I'm walking, that might be a good time to post those comments and questions in the chat dialogue. All right. Come on, let's go. All right, first thing, yeah, get that umbrella on there. First thing real quick, you can stay right there. We just need to real quickly, we need to identify this right here, okay? This is our main water meter that comes from the municipality that feeds the water into the home. Not necessarily part of our irrigation system, but very crucial and very important when it comes to water savings. We mentioned all those people: Brownsville, Dallas, Fort Worth. Everybody got hit hard with the freeze this year, and there's a chance somewhere in your water at the house, whether it's at the main, your main valve, your meter, there may be some leaks in there because of cold expansion. So the best thing there is just, we want to stab around there, feel that, make sure we don't have a damp zone around the meter. Open the box up, look in there, make sure there's no standing water inside of that. A little puddling in the bottom is pretty normal, but if you've got standing water in there, if you've got a wet zone around that meter box, we need to get that checked out. All right, let's go back this way. Okay, as I mentioned in my teaser on Wednesday, we got to spend a little time maybe to find all this stuff. Come over on this way a little bit so you can see this better. Okay. Next thing to identify here is our backflow preventer. We got a good angle? All right. So right here, this is our backflow preventer. If you are in a municipality, more than likely there's some regulations that say if you have an irrigation system, you must have one of these installed. And it is very important because this is our water coming from our main heading through here to our irrigation system. And so if I have any problem with the main water supply, usually is if there's a fire and the fire department has to hook up to a water hydrant, you get a vacuum of water, and that pulls water away from our homes. If there's a break in a line, if somebody hits it with a car incidentally, you get a vacuum of water moving back through the line. And so without one of these installed, the water that's down in the ground in your PVC and in your pop-up risers in that landscape can be sucked back through here and back into the main water supply. So it is important. So even if it's not regulated, I would recommend having one of these installed. If you have a well at home and you have an irrigation system, it's pretty important that you have one of these installed, because I don't want to be drinking the water from my irrigation system unintentionally. There's fertilizer in there, possibly, and bacteria and fungi that's just kind of living in those lines, and we don't want that back into our potable water supply. So real quickly on this, water is moving through here. What this little mushroom top here is a water diverter. So when your irrigation system completes its cycle and the valve's cut off, you tend to get a little back kick of pressure moving back into the system. And so the way that this works is it's called a vacuum breaker. is really what your backflow preventer is that as that pressure moves back with air and water, is that it temporarily allows it to release. So when your irrigation system completes a cycle, don't be surprised to see a little water splashing out of here. What that is just basically, as this is cut off, the air that was in the line with pressure is moving back with water in it, is released through here, and it just sputters out, and so you have some water dripping down from this. So perfectly normal. But if your irrigation system is not running, we don't want to see any water here. So a good idea after the winter storm that we had would be to open up some of this insulation here and here and just feel the pipe. If it's damp, if this is damp, if there's moisture on here, if you open this up here and there's moisture inside of here, inside this insulation, we know we have a problem there. And we want to get that addressed, because that problem is just going to continually get worse if I have a leak anywhere in this system. Sometimes you can just get debris that gets clogged up inside of the orifice here. And this would need to be the top would need to be taken off, and then this kind of breaking down, and then clean out the system inside of here. Problem here with this is that if I identify a problem with this backflow, and this is regulated by a municipality, this work really needs to be done by a licensed irrigator or a certified plumber that has the credentials to work on backflow preventers. It's worth the effort and the money to get this repaired so that this part of the irrigation system is working effectively. I'm looking at this here. No moisture here. Everything looks pretty good and intact. Don't see any damp spots either at the tip down here. So we're going to give this one a green light. All right, let's go look at the controller. Any questions so far? All right. Okay. All right, so as I mentioned on Wednesday, you're going to see a whole lot of different types of controllers. Go back to these here real quick. We're going to see a lot of different types of controllers. As we can see here, this was an old diagram that shows the locations of the heads and the stations of the irrigation system. This was with one that we have to dial in all the zones and settings and run times, but they've just replaced it with this, and this is a smart controller. I really like these because as far as user function, now I don't have an iPhone, but the way this is set up, it's really kind of on purpose. It's designed to mimic a smartphone. It looks like a smartphone on here as far as the diagram goes. It's got touchscreen options on it. As we see right here, I could come in the garage and I could check the weather forecast, because what this does is it tunes in to our local weather station, and there's several options usually of choosing the most appropriate and the most accurate local weather station that can give you the data for your smart controller. And what this does is that it goes based off of rainfall, humidity, sunlight, cloudiness, temperature, and it automatically adjusts the run times for your system. Hey, Suma, good to hear you on there. I can't see you. But this is really awesome because we keep talking about ET, or this evapotranspiration, and we create a coefficient on watering, and we normally have to do that manually, and it's a lot of math. So this system here really helps us move away from that and lets the computer do all the work. So what this does is based off of seasonality, and the amount of rainfall, temperature, sunlight. It's going to adjust your runtime, and more than likely it's going to just turn the system off unless we're in a situation that the plants are in a negative as far as moisture within the plant and moisture in the soil. Now, as good as this thing is, it's only as good as the data that comes into it. So what I would recommend periodically is to cross-compare the readings that you're seeing on this with another app. So if I have a weather app on my phone, I want to come out here and I want to pull up my weather app that's using a different tower and cross-compare the data that I'm seeing as far as percentage of rain, days that it looks like it's going to rain, with what I'm seeing from this weather station. If they look about the same, we're in good shape. If it's not showing anything on here and we're seeing rain on the forecast, it's a pretty good chance that the tower that you're receiving that data from is malfunctioning. And if it's malfunctioning, well, we're just not getting good data on there. So the other function here with this is I can easily go in here and I can click on my program, zones, look at the weather. And this one is set up. We've got front beds, front lawn, side of the house, backyard, pool, around the pool, etc. And I can click on those, and it's going to show me the run time that I have established for those beds.
Someone said, we seem to find that the weather station our smart control is using is not very close to what we're experiencing at our home.
Yeah, that's very true. So best thing to do on that is if you have the option to go in, like this one here, it has a tag-along app that you can use on your desktop, on a tablet, or on your cell phone. And there's a lot more options with those. So what I would recommend is that if you can get on your desktop or laptop and access the app that pairs with this, is go in and see what other weather stations are in your area. Maybe you can find one that's a little bit more reliable on a constant basis. Sometimes they do go down, but there's lots of weather stations out there. If you use Weather Underground, you can go on there and change your weather station, and you'll see that there's going to be a whole bunch of small weather stations set up in your area. So the other thing here for doing an evaluation is I can go in. Now I'm not going to mess them up here and start punching on things, but I can go in and I can set up a manual runtime for any one of these. What I would recommend for what we're trying to accomplish is do a 2 to 3 minute runtime on each of these for our evaluation. Within 2 or 3 minutes of hitting front beds, I can go out in those beds and I can look through each of the pop-up risers and make sure that they're pointing in the right direction, make sure they're not clogged, etc. And within 3 minutes, that's ample time for us to see if I've got any geysers, if I've got heads that are going and spraying in funny directions, and have some flags with me, have some marker flags. And if I see a problem, go out there and tag those. This is the easier way to do it. I'll show you the hard way to do it here in a minute, but come in here and just manual runtime, 2 to 3 minutes per station, and then run through those, and then just try to stay ahead of it through the system. Like I mentioned here again, this can be paired with your phone. So cool thing about it is that if there's a funny thunderstorm that pops up in the middle of nowhere, I can easily, if I'm out of town or away from the house, I can pull this up and I can go in there and I can cancel my run for the irrigation, and it's going to shut it off even. I can manually override it from the phone, even if it's not showing that rain here. For instance, the homeowner here last week, we had 6 inches of rain, and her feature on here only measured an inch and a half. So some of that we can't let the computer do it completely on its own. We do need to kind of check on it periodically and make sure that we're right. Any other questions on the controller? Most definitely. Well, and yeah, of course, we encourage all types of irrigation, looking at efficiencies. Rainwater harvesting is fantastic. Using drip irrigation, just using a water hose. And if you don't have a big yard and don't want to go through it, but the thing that we need to know, particularly here in Fort Bend County, is that I mentioned we've got heading on 900,000 residents, and we'd say about 500,000 homes. A lot of that is suburban development, and we would say that probably 35% of those homes have an irrigation system that's installed by the builder. Okay, so that's a lot of homes. And so whether, if we want to irrigate by hand, by all means, that's a fantastic way to do it and pretty foolproof. But if we've got one of these things and it's running on its own, we definitely need to know how to do it so that we can start conserving more water.
John said using the phone app helps save time running back and forth.
Well, yeah, and getting wet, which I've already done here once today, so it definitely helps you out in that area. All right. All right, so I'm going to look here at this one, this head. So if I punched on the controller, front beds was the first zone on that. Whoa, watch out. We're going to see all these risers pop up in these beds. Like I mentioned on Wednesday, hey, don't let that fly over. Is that some of the heads are I can see it, right? Pretty easy. But some of these heads, as we build these beds up with soil and compost and mulch, they tend to get buried. So you'll need to start the run time and really spend some time in looking around. One thing that they had up on the wall above the controller was a chart that had a diagram not only of the zones, but the particular location of each head, each emitter within this zone. And that's pretty helpful because, I can put a stepping stone out here or a rock down in a spot. And if that head is down underneath the mulch and the soil here, I may have forgotten where that's at. And I might not even ever see that moisture coming up, but it's just all that head is doing is spraying down into the soil and making a big wet zone in one spot. So mapping the location out on paper of each head in your zones, it's a really good idea. Let's walk around over on this direction. All right, so you can hang out in the shade there. Okay, now as we come here between the homes, we start to see our irrigation valve boxes. And within this system here, we've got a whole lot. Each station has its own small round valve box. This again, in charting and diagramming this is noting the location of each of these. And probably also what would be important is numbering these and keeping track on your diagram of which valve these are controlling. And so that helps us get an idea of which one we want to turn on manually if we need to test it out manually instead of going through the controller. There's two. What's it? What's that? Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'll try to be more careful with it. So a couple things here with this is I've got a solenoid valve down in this box. And what that is, it's got a little electronic charger with the wires go to the control box that gives it the signal for that solenoid to power up, to turn on or turn off. And so we want to make sure that our wiring is intact. If I look down in this box here, I see the wiring. It's got some screw nuts. Make sure that those wire nuts are attached on there firmly. connecting those wires. Sometimes a little electrical tape around there securing it is a good idea. Just with time, those wires. Okay, so if you can get over here. We back on? Sorry folks, we lost you there for a second. We had a little bad Wi-Fi connection in that spot of the house, so I can continue that discussion. So I'm looking at the same thing. I've identified the valve box for this rear zone out here, and looking down in here into the valve box, I can see the wiring. The wire nuts on here are securely attached, and they're not loose. Again, a little duct tape or a little electrical tape on there probably would be a good idea. Make sure they don't come loose. Second thing I wanted to see, do I have standing water inside of this hole? This one, I don't. But one of those two valve boxes on the side of the house, I had some water in there. It's about half full of water. And the box that was next to it, about 2 feet over, had a little bit of water, but not that much. There might be an issue there. We might have some leakage on one side of that valve. That's a slow leak that may be identified, as we might have to dig that out. So for that zone over there, I would put a flag on that and come back and take a look at that. What we can do there is I can pump the water out of that hole, pump it out to the bottom, and run that station for about 10 minutes. And if that hole fills back up pretty quickly, then I know we have an issue on one or other side of that valve that's going to need to be addressed. The fact that I had one valve next to the other, one of them had a lot of water and the other one didn't have much, suggests that there's a problem with that valve, because the soil should drain fairly similarly. So I would flag that to dig it out and maybe take a look to see if I have a leak. Other thing is, if I want to be able to see this whole valve, so if I look down in here, I can see the solenoid that where the wires go into. No, because it's way down in here. And then on top of the valve body, there's a little bleeder valve. And what that is designed to do, occasionally we can open that up a little bit, and the water is going to spew out of the top of that like a little geyser. And that's a good way to clean out maybe a little bit of sediment or debris that may be on the line. Don't do it all the way off, because it's going to come out with pretty good pressure, and we may lose that little valve. Just loosen it enough on there that it relieves that pressure. But one thing that you do need to note is whether you turn the solenoid valve or you turn the bleeder valve, this zone is going to come on. We're going to open up that valve one way or the other. So good thing to note is the location of your irrigation heads. There's some pop-up risers down along this run. So if I hit that, I'm going to get sprayed in the back with water unintentionally. This valve right here looks pretty good. I will circle back over here into the shade. You can hang out right there. Okay. Now this particular system, we don't have any drip lines in it. We don't have any small tubing with drip emitters moving anywhere to any plant material. Everything is on underground pop-up spray heads. which makes it pretty easy to work on this system because you don't have a whole lot of different inventory, and it's a small yard. So if we had more bed space back here with ground cover, mulched beds, then we may be talking about installing some drip irrigation into those beds. But this yard is fairly small, and it's mostly turf grass, and so these pop-up risers here will probably be the way to go. One thing that's happened here in this landscape is that the homeowners put a pool in last year, and so that has a big impact on with the footprint of the pool and trying to retrofit your irrigation system from what it was originally set up as. Sometimes it ends up messing up with zones. You get zones that are split, but in this case, what we're probably noticing is we've got some spray emitters on here that are maybe inappropriate as far as throw length. So these are color coordinated. You're going to find red, orange, brown, blue, black, and each one of these here are going to represent a different throw length of this. And so probably these heads here were originally further back, and to give us a little bit more length of throw onto these heads. Since we moved it, we may be kind of spraying this back fence back here when this is turned on. So all you really need to do on that is measure the distance that you want it to go. And we can use a riser clamp on here and just unscrew the head on here and replace it with the right one. This one right here is going to be a half circle fan head, and we want this to be about a 12-foot throw. That's the distance that we're wanting the spray head to water, which would get us right about to that fence and cover most of this area. So we should be in pretty good shape. You can easily switch out these emitter heads. They're just usually a couple dollars a piece at an irrigation supply or some of the box stores. One other thing is I'm looking at these heads here. They're nice and even. They're not sideways. I'm feeling around the side of this. There's no damp spots here. If there was a soggy spot around any of these heads, would suggest that maybe underground I have a fitting that it came loose, or the body of this irrigation head maybe has cracked because of cold weather. But all these look pretty straight as I go through and look at them. I don't see any wet spots around any of these heads. But the second thing is when we're running this station and we're out here looking at it, we want to make sure that this head is shooting the half circle. It's going the right length. It's spraying evenly. If we're seeing some problems where maybe this is just skewing out in 2 or 3 different directions, probably what happened is the filter that's inside of this pop-up is clogged up with debris. Very common on your irrigation system. So all you have to do on that again is we would pull this and use a pop-up clamp, unscrew this head, pull out the filter, look at it, make sure there's no debris in there. This one is clean, clean, clean. And then just screw that back down, making sure we're pointed in the right direction. And voila. That filters looks good. There's no trash in there, so we've got a green light on that. That's all kind of the basics of this system. A couple other pieces that I mentioned before. Sometimes you'll see a main irrigation cutoff valve that would be installed right before your backflow preventer. This system didn't have that. Good thing with it is you can turn off that valve if you need to do repairs to the backflow preventer. Otherwise, if you don't have that valve in place, then you have to turn the water main off out at the meter and cut the water off for everything else in the house to do any repairs on the backflow. So a good thing is to have that valve, but also to inspect it, make sure there's no leaks with that main irrigation shutoff valve. Other stuff is going to be black supply line going to drip emitters, the 1/2-inch rigid drip line installed in our beds are prone to problems if we didn't install them correctly. So the good thing there is just when you turn that zone on is walk the area. We don't want to see water spewing up. We don't want to see water bubbling up from one location. We may have a fitting that popped loose and water is just being released out into the bed. So just a quick run through on the areas where we have drip irrigation. It's a good idea. One thing, actually two things that I recommend for drip zones. One is a pop-up notifier that's going to let us know that that zone is turned on. There's several different flagger notifier tools that you can get for a drip zone. Some of them just have a little flag that pops up when the line is pressurized. Some of them have a little pop-up riser that sticks up out of the ground with a colored end on there. And if you install either one of those, when you run that drip zone, if that flag is up, then we know that that system is pressurized appropriately. If you run the system and that flag doesn't come up, comes up just a little bit, it doesn't rise up all the way, then we have a pressure issue within the line. We would suggest that somewhere in there's a break in the line and water's being released, which is also releasing the pressure. So we would need to go a little bit further, take a rake and rake around the drip line, exposing it and seeing if we can identify where there might be a leak in the system. Another cool tool for drip is called a flush valve. In every zone or station for drip, it's good to put on a inline mushroom head flush valve. And basically what that does is when we have water moving into the line with pressure, it releases the air out of the line, and also it collects any debris that may be collected in the line, and it sends it out, that flush valve. And as the line builds up pressure with water, the rubber orifice that's inside of there locks up and locks the pressure back into the system. So this little mushroom flush valve that's installed in the drip line, it does a couple things. But main thing that it does for me is that it takes all the dirt that may be accumulated within the system and it flushes that out each time the system pressurizes. So that's all the basic features for a spring checkup, particularly this year. We went through the winter storm, Uri, whatever we want to call it. It was a nightmare across the state of Texas for people, and it was probably a nightmare on your irrigation system at home. Trust me, we had plenty of fun ourselves trying to fix broken pipes, but we had problems with our irrigation system, with our backflow, you name it. We had a lot of water leaks because of that. And so if you haven't gone through each of these components within your system, then there's a pretty good chance that there's something in there that may have been impacted by the cold that you could easily address by just going out and doing this quick identification of issues. If you get through the whole system and we don't see any problems, hey, it's your lucky day. Do we have any questions on the line? Well, it is 1:40 on my clock, and I think we've covered about everything. If there's any questions, I'll kind of hang on here for another couple minutes, and we'll answer those. If not, and people are heading out, have a fantastic weekend. Again, it's beautiful spring weather here in Southeast Texas. Hopefully, wherever you're chiming in from, the weather is fantastic. Have a good weekend. Go support your local independent nursery centers. Go buy some plants, do some gardening, drink some iced tea, and have a fantastic time. Y'all take care.